Hey YouTube, what's up? This is Ben from ShouldIGetIt.com, and in this last episode of Shooting Cars, I'm going to be teaching Michael how to light paint his super sick G35 with this LED light bar that I bought at Harbor Freight for less than $40. So as you guys can see, we're just using a Canon 60D on a tripod with a kit lens, so 18 to 135 IS. And so I'm going to walk Michael through how to position the light, a couple tips and tricks, how to deal with ambient light, like you guys can see in the background here, and then of course how to create the actual final image in Photoshop by combining a couple of different layers. So we have the headlights, the wheels, the bumper, the trunk, the roof line, the doors, all that type of stuff. So we're going to go through the entire process of how to make the image that you guys saw in the thumbnail. Let's hop into it right now. I'll show you what to do, what not to do, and of course how to put it together in Photoshop. So let's hop in. Once you have your exposure going, you want to slowly walk along the lines of the car holding the light parallel to the body and light it in pieces depending on how long your exposure is. So as you can see, we did the top of the car above the hip line, and then we did an exposure for the bottom, so that got the wheels, the door, and the side skirts. But we were missing the front of the car, so I had Michael go in and take a third image, and he lit the front of the bumper, the grille, a little bit around the headlights, and then he worked his way up to the quarter panel and the hood as well in one exposure. And you can see at the end of all of these frames, Michael turns off the light and walks out so that he doesn't have a hot spot in any of those shots. One thing you want to watch out for is not getting your feet in the light. So as you can see, this is a big mistake here because a lot of ghosting appears from shots like this. So you get little blurry parts of your shoes and your legs, so you want to make sure you don't do that. And you also don't want to waddle or move the light up and down bouncing. I was doing this trying to block the light, but instead get some barn doors or use black tape. So guys, now that we're in Lightroom, I want to walk you through a couple of beginner mistakes that you should be wary of and try not to make, otherwise your whole shoot's going to get kind of messed up. And then we're going to go through a couple of the raw shots. I'm going to tell you which ones I picked, and then of course show you how to put them together and make it really pop. And so the first thing when you get out to location that you want to do is just go outside and take a really long exposure. As you can see, this wasn't even on a tripod. I just wanted to make sure that we had a decent amount of darkness to work with. So of course the light paint, you have to do this at night. You have to do this in a very dark area. And so I took the camera out, did a 10-second exposure at f/22. It was nice and dark, so that was good. And then I moved it up to a 20-second exposure, and the side of the car was still dark, so that means that I could light paint for 20 seconds, which was awesome. So once you have your exposure and you make sure the location works, put the camera on a tripod, set the focus to manual and turn off image stabilization or VR, and then zoom in live view to get perfect focus on the emblem of the wheel or the headlight or the grille or whatever part you want to make sure your focus is locked in on. And by doing manual focus, if you have to do multiple passes, you'll make sure that the images are all sharp in the same ways and they're not mismatched sharpness, because that gets to be a big issue. And if you have VR turned on for a long exposure, it's actually going to make it very blurry on a tripod. So never use image stabilization when shooting long exposures on a tripod. So the first mistake I see beginners make is having an image looking something like this. And the problem is not these light streaks over here over the car or outside the car. It's the light on the car right here. You're never going to be able to get rid of this. And so what I recommend is you never have any light pointed into the camera directly. So what I mean by that is you got to watch out for your light to not have light leaks in the back. So you can see this LED light bar actually spills a little bit of light in the back, which is what this is from. And so to counteract that, we put a black hoodie over the LED light bar, the back part of it, and so that way the light didn't hit the car. And you can see right here, you don't see any of that streaking in this first take. Then the second issue is having the light be blocked by your body. So for this take, Michael went from left to right, and with the camera pointed straight here, his body was actually blocking most of the light hitting the car. And so what you want to do in this case is either point the light further to the side so that it's not being blocked by you and start from further out, or more easily, you can see Michael started on the right side for this next take right here and walked towards the left, and he just bounced the light off of the car right here and had to go forward, and that way it didn't bounce straight into the camera, but you can see in this still frame right here that the light hit the car and was not blocked by his body at all. So hopefully that makes sense, and as you do this more and more, try it out from left to right and right to left, and you'll see the big difference that it makes. And the other biggest issue is not having a base exposure. So a lot of people have a bunch of different light paint stuff like this, and they won't have one shot where they didn't light paint at all, and you want to make sure that you have this frame right here. You want the car in the same position, the focus in the same place, the same exposure time, so you have your background set, and the headlights turned off, and this way you have a base exposure to work with, so that you don't mess up if you have light streaks somewhere, because then you can just mask these out really easily. So make sure you don't have any light streaks like this over the car. That's going to be a pain in the butt to work with, and then you're set. So let me show you guys the files that I selected to work with. You can see out of those 31 takes, we chose 4. So I have this right here. This lit up the wheels and the side, the bottom half of it, so up about to the hip line here. Then I have the top of the car lit up, and we have some reflection in the windows, but we're going to be able to mask that out really easily. We have this reflection right here on the body, but since we're going to be using this take, it's not a big issue. And then we have the front bumper selected right here, so that was the only part missing. The hood is kind of lit by the natural ambient light. And then we have the base exposure to work with. So what you're going to do is select all those files, hit Command A, and then do Edit In, Open as Layers in Photoshop. And once you click that, it will open up a project right here. And so we're going to go through and turn off the layers until we have the bottom, and we're going to name them. So I'm going to name this one Base. This is going to be Front Bumper. Then we have another one. This is going to be the top side. And then we have the bottom side. So once we have all those named, we're going to select all the layers. We're going to type in Align, Auto Align Layers, hit OK. And this way, if your tripod moved at all, for whatever reason during the shoot, it's going to line up everything perfectly for you. And then all you have to do is crop a tiny bit. So you can see we have the layers named. And then just like the interior that we built up, or the strobe shots, we're going to go to Lighten Blend mode. And that way you can see we have the front bumper adding light right there. And then we are going to add a layer mask, select a brush. I'm going to do 70% opacity, so hit 7 on your keyboard. And then I'm just going to brush away everywhere that the light hit that I don't want to be lit up. So I just want the bumper, and so I don't really want the ground. So you can see that, change it a little bit. And I want to keep the shadow from the ambient base exposure. So I don't want the shadow from this shot. So I'm just going to brush that out with a mask. And now you can see we have the front bumper lit up, and we have a little bit of the wall right here. And later on, if this becomes too bright, we can go through and fix it. But I actually like the little bit of blue that I added to that dragon's claw, or whatever that thing is. So then we're going to go to Lighten on our next layer, and you can see that this added the top side right here. It also added this weird kind of pink-orange hue on the wall, so you can see that right there. So you want to be careful of that. So you're going to hit Layer Mask, and for this I'm actually going to do the opposite. I'm going to brush in the places that I want to keep with like a 90% opacity brush. So I pretty much want to keep from the hip line up. So we're going to do this right here. And this way I can see what's not going to be lit up. And so you can see that I have that set there. And all I'm going to do is hit Command-I to invert that. And now I have this layer lit right here. And you can see that lit the top of the car. It got a little bit too much of the background. So I'm going to go in the back here with my brush, do a 60% opacity. Whoops. And I'm just going to make sure that brush is out so it's not really ghosting or doing like a weird halo type thing on the background. So now we have the side and the hip lit up. Next, we're going to go into the bottom layer and again hit Lighten. And now you can see that these layers are coming together nicely. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to brush away by using black with 90% opacity. So I'm going to brush right here, up about to the hip line. Get it all the way to the trunk. And now that I'm set, I'm going to hit Command-I and invert it. And now you can see that the car is lit and we still have the natural shadow from the base exposure. Now I do want the wheels a little bit brighter, so I'm going to go and make sure the wheel wells have a tiny bit of light in them. And then from the top side, you can see we have this reflection right here that I don't like. So I'm just going to brush it out. And I'm going to do a lower opacity for that. And now we have a clean kind of end to the line. Now if I want to get rid of this reflection right here in the windshield, I can see that's in the top side layer, or in the windows rather. So all I need to do is select a black brush, zoom into here, and I can just select with my lasso tool, make a line right here, hold Command to connect them, and then I can brush away with a 100% opacity brush. And now I'm set, and that window reflection is gone. So you guys can see that now we have the car pretty much lit up. we have the ground still with a shadow from the natural exposure. And so if I wanted a little bit more light in the wheel wells, what I can do is grab a curves layer or a brightness contrast. So I'm going to go into adjustment layers, grab brightness contrast, turn the brightness up, and you can see we just have a tiny bit more detail in the wheel wells there. And so I'm going to bring this to the very top. You can see that right there. And I'm going to invert it and then brush right here in the wheel wells. So we're going to put white right there. It's going to get a little bit of the tires as well. And you'll see this looks like way too much at first. And so we're just going to take this layer and bring the opacity down right about to 34%. And that just adds a tiny bit of light. And this is totally up to you if you want that, but I like it. It just makes it a little bit less of a dark hole. So we got that, and now what we're going to do is group these by selecting the layers, hitting Command G, and this is the actual light paint right here. So you want to make sure you don't have any weird light paint coming onto the wall, and you can see that the claw right here, like we talked about with the first exposure, becomes a little bit brighter, and I'm actually okay with that. There's not any weird like halos around the car, so we're pretty set there. Now what I want to do is desaturate the ground and the background a little bit. And so for the ground, I'm simply going to select, once I zoom out a little bit here, I'm going to use my lasso tool, and I'm going to select just the ground portion. So make sure you have nothing else selected. Hit L for lasso, and we're just going to quickly click around using my magic trackpad here instead of the Wacom tablet. And we're going to click around the bumper. And again, like with every tutorial, with more time that you put into this, the better it's going to come out. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of perfecting later on, but I'm just going to fast forward through right here, and you'll see what I'm talking about with the ground. So I've carefully made a selection right here on the ground, and I just need to add this little portion right here. And you can see that now the ground is selected around the car, and I'm just going to right click and feather this by about 30 pixels. And then we are going to go to brightness/contrast in our adjustment layers. So you can see now I can play with the contrast of the ground. I can also play with how bright or how dark the ground is, so that's totally up to me. And then since I have that layer mask selected, what I can do is go to hue saturation, bring the saturation down so it's not as orange. And you can see that makes the whole image black and white. But if I just take the layer mask from here and hold Alt or Option on my keyboard and drag it up, hit OK, and now the ground has gone black and white. And so what I want is just a little bit of color, because you can see there's a little bit too much orange and red when it was at 0. So I want a little bit more gray. There we are. And so we want to change this to be ground saturation. And this is ground contrast. And now with these two simple adjustments, you can see we made the ground be a little bit more lit up, and it looks better. Now the next thing I want to do is hop over to the wheels, and I want to brighten those up. So we're going to make a selection using our lasso tool right here. I'm going to include the tires in this. And I'm just going to quickly click over the wheels and tires, the portion that I can't see. Select that. Do the same thing on the back, so hold Shift while you have your lasso tool, and that way it will add to your selection. Now that I have my wheels selected with the lasso tool, I'm going to right click and feather this by about 60 pixels just to make it more of a circular shape, so you can see that. And then I'm going to go to adjustment layers, grab curves, and I'm going to grab it right here and just bring it up to make the wheels pop a little bit more. So you can see, again, if we go to my layers, there's the wheels dark, there's the wheels brightened a little bit. And the cool thing is we could do the same thing on the car. So if you want to change how bright the car is, you can make a selection similar to that and just use the same curves layer to bring it up. So if you have any part of the car that's a little bit too dark, like right here, the side skirt is a little bit darker than I'd like, I can simply make a selection like this, really quick and easy. I can feather it, let's do like 25 pixels there, and then I can grab the curves and just bring that part of the car right up. So there are some parts that you might not have light painted perfectly, but you can bring it back and make it look like you spent a little bit more time light painting on there. And you can see the transition's a little rough between the side skirt and the top, so you can feather this with the layer mask or by playing with your curves to make it not as bright. So we can bring it down right there. But there's a lot of pieces of the car that you can do that to, and I'm going to do that to the quarter panel as well, because it's kind of in the shadows right here. So I'm going to grab that, and the more you feather the selection, the smoother that transition is going to be, right? So instead of 25, I'm going to do 50. I'm I'm going to grab my curves. And again, I can pull this up right here. So curves is your best friend when you are putting together a light painted file. Now, the final touches that I would put on this image is going through the background and desaturating it a little bit so it's not as orange, and also doing brightness contrast so you can play with that. In this setting, unfortunately, the lights on the wall made this hideous star shape right here. And so what I could do is I could just cut all of this out and put black, and that way I wouldn't have anything here, but it's a little bit more advanced, and I'm actually not going to do that for this file, as you guys are going to see on my Instagram. So at this point, all you really need to do is go through your adjustment layers and make sure you don't have any weird spots of light. Like right here, you can see in the wheel well, it looks a little bit strange. And so what I'm going to do there is grab my brighten layer, and I'm going to darken it on the ground because that wasn't lit up. So this is my curves. Where is it at? The wheel's brighten right here. So I'm going to go to my black brush, and I'm just going to brush right here and get rid of that. And the same thing on the ground right there. So now the shot is pretty much done. What you're going to do is group all the adjustments together. So we're going to call that adjustments. You can see the difference that it made there. So first we added the light, and then we added our adjustments. And now I'm going to clean up a little bit. So I'm going to clean up this little blob right here. I'm going to take this light out. I'm going to clean this lens flare. I'm going to clean the bottom. And another cool tip that I'm going to show you guys is playing with selective colors. So we're going to go to our adjustment layers. We're going to select selective color right here on the very bottom. And I'm going to select the blues. And this way I can change kind of the hue and saturation of the blue, but with a lot more control. So you can see I can change the black point of the blue. So I can slide to the left, make it a lot brighter, or I can slide to the right, make it darker. So I want this car a little bit on the brighter side. And so this is cool to brighten the entire vehicle, which is really helpful. And then if the car is a little bit too cold, right, let's say it were on this side, and I want it a little bit warmer, I can play around with the tone of the color by using the yellows, the magentas, and the cyans. And this, of course, you can change the car color with as well if we want to make it a really cool purple car, and then do a layer mask so that the dinosaur in the back doesn't change. But you can see with that, we just have the car a little bit brighter, and the blue changed a tiny bit, but it still looks very authentic. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below. It's a little bit more in-depth than my previous light painting tutorial, and I'm really sorry for how jump cutty this video was, but the fire alarm went off. This is my 19th take of this video because, as you guys can imagine, with a really long video, it's really hard to show everything. But if you have questions, hit me up on Instagram at @acarphotographer. I hope you're still watching. I hope you subscribe. And don't worry, I will see you in a future video. Thanks so much for watching. Peace. Selection. You want to make sure that you don't get... Jesus.